The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hello, everyone. Welcome. Thanks for joining us. We're just going to give everyone another minute or so to get settled, and then we'll get started with the webinar. All right, I think we're ready to go. Thank you, everyone, for joining us for today's webinar, How to Create a Digital Strategy for Procurement. I'm Hillary O'Brien. I'm the head of content here at ProcurementIQ, and I'll be helping to moderate today's webinar. Before I introduce our speaker today, I'm just going to cover a few housekeeping topics. Today's webinar is being recorded. We'll email the link to you after the event so you can rewatch it or share it with your colleagues. So be on the lookout for that email within a day or so. Also, if you have any questions during the presentation, please feel free to type them into the chat box and we'll do our best to answer some questions at the end. If we're not able to get to your questions at the end, we'll be sure to follow up with you via email after the event. So today I'm pleased to introduce you to our speaker, Bertrand Maltaverne. Bertrand has extensive experience with and a passion for the digitalization of procurement. He understands the opportunities and challenges that procurement professionals face, and he's here to give us some great tips on how you can get started with creating a digital strategy. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to Bertrand.
Well, thank you, Hillary, and welcome to everybody for today's webinar. And I will start off by answering actually in a couple of seconds the main question of the day, because I think, all right, it's not moving forward. That basically the obvious answer to the question of the day is actually blockchain. That's it. I mean, if you had to believe the current hype, then the answer to all questions and problems we have in the world, well, the solution is basically blockchain. It is everywhere, and everybody seems to have a blockchain project. I mean, joke aside, this illustrates a serious problem because basically answering with technology first, it's like putting the cart before the horse. And I think it's the wrong approach, basically because technology is there to means and not an end. And basically not understanding that can create serious problems, and things don't always go well if you're not able to select the right tool for the right job, as illustrated on that picture. Could be a big ouch at the end of the day. So basically, in terms of introduction, what I want to say is that it's very important to have the right approach. And at the end of the day, I think if we all here, it's because all procurement professionals understand the role of technology and the imperative of, let's say, becoming a digital master to increase the value proposition of procurement. And the thing is that to get there, what I suggest is to follow a three-step approach. Basically here that I've highlighted on that slide, it's basically to choose first and foremost the right battle. So basically what you want to achieve in terms of result could be improving efficiency, could be improving effectiveness, could be increasing agility, whatever. And based on that, to select the right weapons. And the technology is just a weapon. And blockchain, as I use as an introduction, as a joke, or RPA, robotic process automation, which we will touch base on later on, could be very great weapons to achieve a certain result. And obviously, last but not least, you have to select and use the right allies, both internally and externally in terms of partners and solution providers. And basically today, I want to describe, let's say, a two-step process. And that process is basically to ensure that procurement organizations are able to create a viable roadmap, a digital roadmap, basically, because this is the question of the day. And as you see here on this slide, the first step is not about technology. Do we really need a digital strategy? And we'll talk about a potential new procurement value proposition. And then we'll address the second major, let's say, step of the roadmap, of the process, sorry, is the exploration and the selection of the proper technology that would enable the vision and the strategy. So when we look at the first step, it's all about a vision, about the why. I don't know why it's moving a bit strange. Sorry about that. And that vision is about the purpose and the why, the end basically, and not the means. And to be a bit provocative in that step, you should really forget about digital, because again, provocation aside, it's basically the matter is not to have a digital itself a strategy, but first and foremost is to have a strategy enabled by digital, as this quote illustrates. It illustrates perfectly for me the place of technology. In a nutshell, digital is just an enabler. It's a great thing. These are great tools, but they are just enablers. And they enable to do things differently, or even better, to do things that were previously impossible. So at this stage, you should forget really about the digital piece of the digital strategy and really have the spotlight on what would be my strategy. And this is where basically you need to think about the value proposition of procurement. And I believe, and I won't detail everything, we are among procurement professionals, but I think there are two main components and two main pillars to a newer value proposition, or to a modern value proposition of procurement, which is about outcome and experiences. All right. So outcome, which you see on the slide, we're talking about effectiveness, we're talking about sustainability. I mean, there is probably no big surprise for you joining this webinar as a procurement professional, because some of these outcomes are well known. I mean, think about cost down or total cost of ownership. They are pretty well known. Some components like, I don't know, risks or risk management, innovation or agility are more recent, let's say, value drivers, and they're even more critical now than they were before, basically because of today's ever-changing, fast-paced, changing world. And this is why the outcome, we all know it. What I want to really highlight, it's the right part, what I would describe as experiences. And it's basically experiences has to do with how the results are delivered to the end users of procurement, so stakeholders or internal customers. And it's something that is more and more important. It's all about customer centricity and how working with procurement, I mean, when I say with and even for procurement, is perceived. It's again, in a nutshell, how the outcomes are delivered. And I think there are a couple of tools that are very important to help define this new value proposition based off outcome and experiences. And there is one I want to really address today. It's all about center on designing outcomes and designing experiences. And the first component under the umbrella of design thinking has to do with what I described often as SRM Square. So it stands for the usual SRM definition that you all know, supplier relationship management, but actually it throws in the mix another key partner of procurement, which is stakeholder. So for me, SRM Square, it's about managing supplier and stakeholder in an efficient and effective way in terms of relationship. And basically around that, I think it's really about putting the customer, stakeholder, and suppliers. We should not forget suppliers. They are also users of what we do. We work with them every day to put at the center of everything. It is because the value is defined by those who receive it. And we should not forget, obviously, suppliers. So an exercise like, it's a famous approach, the voice of the customer, and a couple of questions we have listed here are very important to be answered and addressed by procurement in terms of designing its value proposition. Do we know the stakeholders well? Do we know the suppliers well? Have we classified, segmented them in order to understand exactly commonalities and maybe differences in the population? Do we know how stakeholders and suppliers define success in the buying process? What do they expect? Do they understand their role in it? And things like that. So you have a couple of questions here. It's all about understanding and empathy of both, and I insist, and this is why it's called SRM Square, suppliers and stakeholders. So it's really understanding the business expectations. And the next, let's say, component of the design thinking has to do with a more personal approach, which is about the user experience. And then it's more at a personal level, the understanding of personal expectations. And it's another key aspect of tailoring experiences. It has to do with basically how easy the collaboration with procurement is. I mean, the results do matter. Don't take me wrong. I mean, don't misunderstand. The results, the outcomes matter, but how they are delivered will continue to matter even more than before. And basically, it's all about procurement not being seen as something to avoid, right? So obviously, this experience is based on more than just technology. Procurement interacts with stakeholders and suppliers in many ways. They are physical, what we call touch points, like meetings and business review, and obviously through applications. And basically, procurement should, I think, demonstrate through its system, people, process, and technology a certain context awareness that it knows the suppliers, knows the stakeholders, and continuously learn about these key partners. So it's time for procurement, I think, to adopt the same approach to its service, quote unquote service. And this is where basically I think digital can help, because through application, you can really deliver a better, I think, service in terms of experience. And this is why, after defining, let's say, the value proposition, this vision aspect, it's important to explore. I don't know why it's always moving like that. Sorry about that. So after defining the value proposition and the purpose, the second main step in that process I'm describing today, it's all about exploring and then selecting the proper enabling technology. And yes, I've used blockchain at the beginning, and there's a lot of hype on blockchain. And if you remember, a few years ago, there was as much hype around big data, and I really love that quote. So I will leave you a couple of seconds to enjoy that quote, and that says that basically big data, everybody's talking about it and nobody knows about it. Well, today you replace big data with blockchain, it's basically the same. Why is that? It's because there is a constant flow of new technologies, and I understand that it's difficult to make sense of it all, to distinguish what is really hyped and maybe for the next 10 years and what is really currently a must. And I've tried to make things very simple in a way to describe what can technology do. And there are 4 areas I think that are very important to have in mind in terms of what is technology enabling or helping with. First one, automation. That's very clear. Removal of tasks is a key driver of technology, and we all know that. We've been using technology for a while. The second one is about decision making. It's how technology can help through some new technologies to analyze much more numbers, much more information real fast, and come up with better decisions in the business. Connectivity has to do with really, I mean, sorry for what I'm going to say now. It's a famous brand that actually disagreed, but it's about connecting people. But it's all about technology being a way to enable ecosystems of extended partners. And I say extended in the sense of internal and external. Could be vendors, suppliers, but it could be also institutions, could be also universities, laboratories, startups, whatever. And fourth, innovation. Technology is a key enabler of innovation in the product by creating new product or creating new product that are tailored and serving more the expectation of the customer, but also in creating new business model. And the first one I want to detail, we won't detail all four today, but it's automation. It's a classic. It's basically, as I said, lowering process cost through removal of tasks. And this is one aspect. The other aspect could be also to use technology as more like an assistant, and also technology to integrate system together. So it's removing some manual tasks related to that. And if we look at these technologies, obviously the two one we want to describe today, there are two. I mean, e-procurement and let's say purchase to pay automation. It's something that's been around for a while, so we all know it. It's all a must-have, I think, in the automation toolbox. The second one, however, there are new technologies, and this is where the second one, robotic process automation or APA, comes in play. It's a very great technology to remove, in effect, to do it in a very short copy paste from one application to the other. RPA is really very good into removing a clerical task when you have to copy information from system A into system B. And RPA is really new in a sense of it came a few years ago, and I think is really ripe for implementation. Another example, after, let's say, basic automation, I want to talk about, it's all about decision making. So we're talking about what kind of outcome are we trying to improve? Well, it's about, from a business standpoint, lower cost, TCO, because we'll take better decision, risk reduction also because we take better decision, protecting the organization against risks. And how we do that? Well, it's because we have better insights, more information, deeper in the supply chain, real time, that enables also us to have some maybe predictive analytics and develop proactive assistance. And here I want to illustrate that with three technologies. The first one is about the Internet of Things. I don't know why it's going here. Sorry about that again. The Internet of Things, and it's all about having in supply chain the ability to generate more and more data. I mean, Internet of Things is about sensors everywhere that enables us to monitor everything that's going on in the supply chain in real time. So we are producing more and more data real time. So we need help because we people cannot cope with that much information. And this is where two newer technologies like artificial intelligence and machine learning come into play. I mean, artificial intelligence, it's all about developing new and better insights on things and people by using computers' ability to crunch and a vast amount of data very fast. So it's really helping us understand and make sense of things we cannot apprehend and find stuff we could not see ourselves. And machine learning, if I had to simplify a little bit, it's all about giving the ability to technology to improve over time with obviously some guidance from us people. That's all the challenge. And I think here we're at the core of something that is an old principle of business, that data is gold, but I would say it's more than ever. And this is where I want to go back briefly to the blockchain hype and topic by just describing it very quickly. I don't know why it's always moving like that. Sorry. About blockchain, that trying to describe it very quickly in a business matter and a business value. I think blockchain comes in when you combine it with all the technology within IoT or artificial intelligence. Because combined with other technology, blockchain can be a backbone for better data. And when I say better, I'm talking about having more trust in the data we collect and we use. And basically, through that increased trust in data, we're going to have more trust in what we do or what computers do with that data. And I think for me, this is a very good example of how one technology, blockchain, should not be looked in isolation. And this is valid for almost every technology. Please never look at one piece of technology in isolation. They're usually a piece of a larger and bigger puzzle. So exploring possibilities and the various technologies available is the first step. The next one, and very important one, is to actually select the technology that's relevant. And this is why we have to move to the selection phase. Trying to move slowly and steadily the slide, sorry. And the selection phase is a very tricky one, as that quote illustrates. Choosing among so many different technology that is more and more complex, and there is almost every day something new that's going to change the world or is going to be a life-changing thing. And in addition, on top of that, you have to take into account the number of providers. So it becomes very difficult for organizations to make sense of the landscape and to make sure that they select the best technology. And when I say best, it's the technology that will bring the results. And I think in the selection phase, there are two important questions and topics to address. So first consideration, it's about readiness. Is or are we, in terms of an organization selecting technology, are my people, my processes, my current technology, my current data, is all of that ready for that new piece of technology? Each and every technology introduces some prerequisites, so you have to be aware of it. Then the other way around, is the new technology we are considering ready for us? I mean, it's all about maturity. The second consideration that is also very important is to forget a bit about features and you know what the technology does, but to think about what it enables and thinking about outcome. And I think the two main ones are about agility and adoption. The selection of the technology I do today should stay valid and be applicable for the next 6 months and even more. We're talking about years sometimes. So I have to ensure that what I'm selecting right now will grow with me, that it's flexible enough to change with me, because my company will change, my organization will change. The second aspect is all about adoption. It's when people really use that technology that you're going to get the value. So it's very important to consider the providers you're going to be working with, because it's not just about selecting a technology, but also people you're going to be working with to implement that technology and make it a success. And therefore, benchmarking providers around success is very important. And I'm talking about references, retention, or churn rate, or whatever you call it, of customers. And another also important indicator is how fast and are they enabling customers and suppliers. And then last but not least, maybe trying to test the technology through a proof of concept or hackathon or something that will give you a hint and a first feedback on how it is to use that technology and what people say about it, right? And the other aspect that is very important too is that technology will lead to more technology. So when evaluating solutions, you have to consider a longer perspective than just that selection process that you're actually running right now. Because technology will lead to more technology by freeing up resources, so you can have people working on new digital initiatives because they work less on low-value tasks. Obviously, each time you introduce a piece of technology or a piece of digital something, then that will increase the what I would call the digital culture of the organization, making it more ready for the next step. And it sometimes creates also new possibilities through digitization. Data that was on paper becoming digital, so that enables you to prepare the next step of your digital adventure, if I can say so. So basically, to conclude, and before we move to the Q&A, I think the main message is that most procurement organizations understand the urgency and the need to become digital master. I mean, you see this number from the Hackett group here on the slide. When I say a vast majority, we're almost talking about 85%. So yeah. However, very limited number of organizations have actually developed a strategy to get there. And I think it's because I would say that technology should be approached the right way, and creating a meaningful and viable strategy and obviously an execution roadmap is really where challenges do exist for many organizations. And this is where many struggle. And what I've tried to do today is to show you that two-step process to do the right thing first and forget a bit about the digital. The first step of the process, it's all about what is your business strategy first and foremost. The most important word is about business strategy. And the second step, do things right. It's all about selecting the proper enabling technology. It's because technology, again, to wrap up, is a means and not an end. So the question is, and the process is all about defining, having you answer the question, what is your end? What is your objective? What levers should you pull to get that result and deliver that result? And how could technology help you pulling those levers? And really to finish off on one last element, right? See if it's moving. I would say that technology, I'm not moving forward, so maybe, yep, sorry about that. Well, okay. Technology is here to augment and not replace people, right? And when we talk about technology and automation, there are a lot of discussions these days with artificial intelligence and future of work, but actually what you should look at is how technology enables you to augment people to do things that were previously not possible. And I think a nice way to look at technology in terms of automation, it's actually removing the robot from the human. Today, we do a lot of things that are pretty boring and pretty non-value adding. So this is about technology taking care of that. And that will give you more time and more time for you, for your teams, and for suppliers, and for everybody to focus on what really matters, understanding context, making decisions, and creating a governance on digital and building relationships. So that's, for me, really the key takeaway of that digital strategy. Thank you.
Thanks, Bertrand. That was great. Before we get to a couple audience questions that I think have come through, just wanted to show you this quick slide and make sure that everyone's aware of the great resources available to you through ProcurementIQ and our Insider, as well as giving you Bertrand's information here in case you want to reach out to him. And again, we'll be emailing these slides to you along with the recording, so don't feel like you have to be scribbling all of his information down. We'll definitely send that to you. We do have time for a couple of audience questions. Bertrand, we've got someone, Adrian here is saying, there are so many technologies, as you mentioned, from kind of old to brand new. And you talked about hype and how procurement professionals are constantly urged to use this technology or that technology. And can you just talk a little bit more about like the maturity and applicability of technology?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I think it's really a very, very good questions, because there is daily marketing messages sometimes from providers and from the press about an expert in that or this technology that say that it's going to change the world or whatever, and it's sometimes difficult for people in the business to really understand how could that really be useful and usable. And I think a way to address that is to think about three. I would describe them as a horizon. Let's say there are a couple of technologies that are already in use and that I would consider as must-haves. When we talked about automation, like anything that has to do with P2P automation, e-sourcing, and even for me, our RPA, so robotic process automations, are technologies that are mature enough and that are ready for use. And some of them are actually 10 years or something old. So yeah. So the first category of technology is to distinguish what is really Horizon 1 in use and must-haves. Then there are a couple of technologies that are coming, and I would say they are something that you should be looking at in terms of watch and maybe piloting or maybe driving some proof of concept. And here I think everything that goes around artificial intelligence and analytics, and even newer user experiences like this fancy word chatbot, should be something that you would be looking at, because some company, I've seen some terrific example of some companies addressing on a very let's say limited scope, trying to make sense of what is that technology, what are the prerequisites, what kind of thing could I do with it, and it's only through this pilot that you can do it. And then there is a third level of horizon, I would say, which is about investigation, something that is not ripe and not mature enough for real industrial applications, but that you should somehow get familiar with. And here, for example, blockchain for me is one of the technology that is in this horizon. Augmented reality could be also something that, except for niche applications, obviously, that's maybe not mature enough for being used. So yeah, think about these three horizons and make your mind through also pilots and proof of concept. That's the best way to I would say, make your own opinion on is that good or too early or not good, because each and every organization is different.
Okay, great. Thank you for that good answer. We've got another one here from Todd. It says, when we're looking to select a technology and we have multiple offers or options, can you give me more information about what to look for?
Yeah, so obviously I would say, I mean, I will not teach procurement professional to how to do their procurement job. I've been a procurement guy myself. So the only thing I want to highlight beyond what I already said, it's really to forget a little bit, and I'm saying a little bit, not totally, features. Because I mean, many applications, and especially if you look at the few horizon I had been talking about before, there are some technology that are pretty mature, and providers are not so different. I mean, the features at feature level, the solution are not so different. So I would say there is a certain danger maybe to look at features, and I would say that I think another approach could be to forget about what I have today and think about what is enabling me to do tomorrow that could be different, to not re-engineer, but obliterate my processes. So, because when people think about feature, they think about copy pasting what they do today in a newer technology. But I think the real value of technology could be to do totally different, right? That's the first aspect. The second aspect is to really think about user. And when I'm talking about user, it's in the organization, in the procurement organization, but also suppliers. Anything that is user-centric is very important. It's going to be very important. So everything that is going to guide users, help users, know about the users is something that I would look at, and I would more put in the spotlight as really key features and functional features. Yeah.
Okay. Great. We have one more, I think time for one more from Elizabeth. Can you give some examples in innovation as part of the 4 dimensions that you talked about?
Yes, because we did not address the 4 dimension, but innovation is an important one, and it's a value driver, a very important value driver for procurement. And what I want to say here is that technology can really help in that matter. And I would say it's all about, for me, what is about collaboration with suppliers and the market in general to design products, right? And being able to use suppliers know-how, and I would say even anyone's know-how, if you talk about crowdsourcing and such platforms, to design the best product by trying to tap in the, I mean, this is a famous title of a book, The Wisdom of the Crowd, right? And I think this is where there is a key element, not maybe going down the road of full crowdsourcing and stuff, but it's really to tap into your suppliers. Supplier-led innovation is a very important and critical capability, and it can be a tremendous competitive advantage. I mean, think about Apple, the iPhone and stuff. I mean, without the suppliers and input from their suppliers, they would not be able to design or manufacture that thing, and so they get a lot of competitive advantage from their suppliers. Other aspect also in terms of innovation, it's all about innovating in terms of talent and resource management. We're talking about the gig economy, and there are newer ways enabled by technology and platforms to also use that for procurement itself or for many categories by using expert on demand. So I think there are platforms to integrate better with suppliers on innovation, but also in working in new ways to get the know-how and talent when we need it, where we need it, right? And I think these are a couple of examples for that innovation dimension I mentioned, but did not really illustrate today.
Okay, great. Thanks, Bertrand. I think we're about out of time, so I'm going to say thank you for everyone who joined us for today's webinar. Bertrand, thank you so much for your time as well.
Welcome.
If we didn't get to your questions, again, look for a follow-up for email from us. Either I will follow up with you or Bertrand will, so we make sure your questions are answered. And then go ahead and look for the follow-up email as well with the recording and the deck. Thank you for your time and have a wonderful rest of your day.